Welcome to LFC, it's Sports Time. I'm your host, Bob Hintz. Today I have with me Gerry Gentry, former coach over at Phoebus High School. Welcome, Gerry.
Thank you, Bobby.
You've done a lot of things over at Phoebus. I mean, just not just one thing. You coached a lot of different things, but let's go back where you grew up. You didn't grow up on the peninsula.
No, I didn't.
Whereabouts did you grow up?
Richmond.
And
went to Holland Springs.
Highland, was Rinaldi coaching up there?
Yes, he was.
Because I remember Kozlowski used to go up there and scrimmage.
Right.
And Coach Rinaldi was the guy up in the central area. He was coach up there for a long, long time. But now growing up, what sports did you play?
I played football for 3 years, my first 3 years there. Wrestled 1 year, but we lost the coach. We had a Catholic priest in the community who was our coach, and he got transferred, and we didn't have a coach, so we only had wrestling 1 year.
Okay.
Really liked it, but only had one opportunity.
Right.
And ran track.
Ran track. What did you run in track? Were you a sprinter?
I was 440.
440.
Ran
Well, back
really,
then,
yeah.
now that's a sprint.
Yeah, right, yeah, right.
But not anymore. And then you graduated after going to Highland Springs and everything, and you went down, spent 1 year down at Chowan.
Yeah.
And money and all situations.
Yeah, right.
So you went back to Richmond and went to work.
Went to work at Vepco.
All right, and talk a little bit about that, because I think it's interesting in what you were doing.
Well, I was, I was working in like customer service, and one of my jobs was to train the college graduates. They would have to come through my desk, and I would have to teach them what I was doing. And after a couple of years of sitting there doing that, I'm thinking, golly, I'm without a college degree, teaching the college degree people what to do, so I decided I needed to go back to school. So that's when I decided to go back to college, and I went to VCU.
Okay, but back then it wasn't called VCU.
RPI. Actually, it changed my first year.
Okay, because you were there with Lester Sapp, if I remember
Lester
correctly.
and I were there. Right.
And Lester was a good basketball player up there. And,
yeah, he was.
He didn't tell me that you were up there at the same time
Yeah.
he was when I had him in here, but that's okay.
Yeah, well,
You didn't play basketball with him.
That's Lester, right. Coached against him, but I never played with him.
Right. Well, now, why you going to school, working? You going to school and working at the same time?
Well,
For part of the time.
I left Vepco and went to work at Sears, and that's when I started going to VCU. And I worked late shift at Sears and took morning classes for the first 2 years.
Right.
And then I ran out of classes that would fit in that morning time frame, so I left Sears and went to work at Philip Morris. I worked night shift there and finished up my school that way.
So you basically put yourself through school.
Well, yeah, I worked full time the whole time. In fact, at that time, I was married and had a family. Yeah. So you had to work.
Yeah, because I know I had to put myself through it. It's not an easy job. But then you finally get your degree.
Yeah.
And you're making great money at Philip Morris.
Actually, I was at that time. I was making $13,000, which was a lot of money in '70, and at Philip Morris. And I got to be good friends with the plant superintendent or the foreman. Nobody knew my name except for the foreman. Everybody knew me as the boy that goes to college at the tobacco factory. But I left. Had a job making $13,000, and I got a job teaching at elementary in Richmond, for starting at $6,500. And,
so you cut your salary in half.
And my wife asked me, was I crazy? But I said, well, I've been to school for 4 years to become a school teacher. I'm certainly not going to at least give it a try. So I tried it for 40 years, and I liked it.
Well, obviously, 40 years will attest to that. But now, when you left, when did you come to the Hampton system?
Well, I got a job, as I said, in January. I actually graduated in January of '70. I got a job teaching elementary. I taught for 1 semester in Richmond, and then got a job. I put applications all over the state. Hampton was the first one I got called to, so I came down here and I met with Ed Satella, and he offered me a job, and I've been here ever since. Okay,
but you went to, was it Spratley?
You're right, Spratley.
And over there, your coaching duties were with what?
Well, I was assistant football with Howard Jackson at the time,
right,
and Wade Trainham, and then I coached JV. They had JV basketball then because that was junior high, and it was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade.
Right.
And also coached track.
Right, but then they cut out the
In
athletics.
81, they took the athletics out of junior high, and so Howard Jackson got the job at Kickintan. So he asked me if I'd come up there to be JV football coach. So I went to Kickintan, and then they never had enough bodies to have a JV team.
Right.
So I was a varsity assistant there for 3 years.
Okay.
And then they opened Phoebus, and I was transferred from Spratly to Phoebus. So I went
Okay,
to
now
Phoebus.
did you put in for that transfer? Or how
No,
did
they
that
just
work?
placed you.
They just placed you back then.
right,
Okay.
right.
And who was the Musselman was the superintendent, wasn't he?
Well, actually, he was a principal
Right.
when he first went, but then he was
Then he became superintendent, right.
Correct. Yeah, he was a principal at Spratly when I was there.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, at Phoebus, you started doing a lot of things. You just didn't coach. I mean, you coached and did much.
I started off as JV basketball. I did that for 2 years, and then got the varsity job by default, basically, for 1 year. But then I wound up coaching it for 4 years.
Right.
And
tell me, can you remember some of your athletes you had when you were coaching? Did anybody particular pop in mind?
Petey Whitfield jumps to mind real quick. Andre Morgan, a great point guard I had. Ivan Harrelson. I had some good
Some of
kids.
these kids that will stick with you.
Jamie Chappelle, who, last I heard, was actually working in the system, doing something for the Hampton school system. It's been a while since I talked to him.
Right. So now you're over there. You're coaching football. I mean, as assistant, and you're basketball. You got the head job of basketball, because I remember doing some ball games with you and interviewing you. And is that when when did you coach against Lester?
Well, that was when I was coaching football at Spratly, right.
Okay.
He was the head football coach at Sims. I was the head football coach at.
Okay. So I wondered where that happened in there.
Yeah, we had some good rivalry.
But now, when you're over at Phoebus, you do a lot of things. How did you get hooked up with working with the EMTs?
Well, it was not a grand plan, grand design. They, along early '70s, they said that everybody you had to teach first aid as part of the ninth grade curriculum. And the only first aid I'd had was a class I took when I was in college. So I felt like if I wanted to teach this, I needed a little bit more education. So I went into EMT program. Actually, I went with a teacher there, a fellow teacher, Diane Mansfield, who you know. Yeah. And we both went to the EMT program. And while I was there, taking the class, took it through ODU. It was a 4-year course. And the instructor asked us if we would like to come down to ride on the ambulance at Phoebus Rescue Squad. So just as an observer. So I went down and observed, and wound up riding with Phoebus for 14 years as a volunteer medic. So,
you get to one thing and then figure, okay, we'll stay here for a while, right? Yeah. But now you did some other things, and one that comes to Operation Smile.
Well, being a medic, volunteer medic with the city, just so happened the same instructor that I had at ODU, who got me to ride on the rescue squad, he was also involved in Operation Smile, which is an emergency medical group that takes care of cleft lip, cleft palates, and they travel third world countries all over the world. And they had put in an adjunct program teaching pre-hospital care, because many of these places where they went, they don't have any pre-hospital care at all. So he asked me if I wanted to get involved in that. So I went to work with volunteer, of course, and with him, and it was about 10 of us that were on the charter program.
So you were doing pre-hospital care, basically, is what you were doing when you was over?
Teaching EMT courses, sort of a compacted EMT course. And went to Kenya in '91 and taught, and I've been to the Philippines 4 times and teaching the EMT course. Wow. So I know, who would have thought?
Yeah, but I mean, it's just amazing how one thing led to another, led to
like
another.
I said, no grand plan, it just sort of
and you just took it and embraced it. And I mean, not just, okay, I took this class, I need this class.
Yeah.
Well, then you took what you learned and took it to a whole new level.
Yeah, well, it kind of took me along with it, really. So,
Like a big river,
yeah,
the water just carried you along. Huh?
It was the 4 trips out of the country were just amazing. I just never would have thought I would have ever done anything like that. But
now, and then during this time, you're also working at the emergency careplex.
yeah, well, when I came back from but the first trip I went to Africa, which was just an awesome trip for me. I could talk about that trip all by itself for a long time. But when I came back, I was an EMT, emergency medical technician, and I decided then that I really wanted a little bit more education in that regard than I had after working over there. So I went into the cardiac tech program, and I got my cardiac tech. And one of the things you have to do in cardiac tech is you have to work about 60 hours in a hospital setting as part of your class.
Oh, okay.
And in part of that 60 hours was in the emergency room. And I really enjoyed that surrounding. So when I finished my CT class, they had just started hiring what they called ED techs at Careplex. So I went and applied for it, and I was the second one that was hired. So
you had some experience over there. They knew who you were, not just a kid going to college, right?
Right, they knew me, yeah. So,
they knew the name.
I went to work there, and I worked for about 7.5 years in the emergency room as an emergency room tech at Careplex.
Now, when you had also at Phoebus, at one time you were co-AD with Bill D.
Bill and I both started at the same time and both left Phoebus at the same time. I helped Bill out in the early years. Sometimes they didn't really have a trainer. Had a trainer, didn't have a trainer, and I helped out sometime. And Bill had asked me many a time if I would come to work as a trainer. So I got to the point working at Careplex, and I made this comment many times, that I was working so many hours at the emergency room. I told my wife, I said, I don't know which one is my career and which one is my part-time job. So I gave that up and took the job as a trainer at Phoebus. So I worked as a trainer for a little over 5 years, and you didn't have to be certified then to do that. Right. But I had enough emergency medicine knowledge that I felt I could do it, and I'd coached for a long time. So I did that, and then the state passed a law that, or statute, that you had to be certified if you were going to get paid for the job. So I really enjoyed. By then, I'm hooked into it. I love the kids at Phoebus. I love the football team. I love working in that football program. So I did it for 2 years, just volunteer. I gave up the salary and just did it voluntarily.
Because you didn't want to need to go through the certification.
Right. It was a lot of hours you would have to go through to get certified. So I did 2 years, and then I was offered the job as the assistant AD, and so we hired a full-time trainer. The city put full-time trainers in all the high schools, so I stepped away from that, and I worked my last maybe 5.5, 6 years as assistant AD or co-AD, or whatever you want to call it. Bill and I did the job together.
When Bill was coaching, you were doing.
Yeah, sort of, kind of.
I remember a particular date, November 29th, 2008, and I'm talking to you on the sideline.
Right.
Everything is fine, and you turn and walk away, and I couldn't move. And I grabbed your shirt,
right,
because I had a TIA,
right,
and I call you my guardian angel.
Well, I turned around. It's funny because I tell this story because I'm teaching first aid CPR right now, teaching all the bus drivers for the city of Hampton. I still do that, even though I'm retired from the school system. I still work in the adult education, and I tell that story every time I talk about stroke, and I turned around and took a look at you, and like I said, all the years I've been in emergency medicine, I took a look at that. My gut feeling right away was you were having a stroke. So, thank God it was minor, and you were as good as you ever were, maybe better.
I don't know, but I too appreciated you, because you calmed me down, and I think that's probably one of the biggest things when somebody's having a stroke is to get them to calm down, and you calm me down, which is good. I know you remarried.
Yeah.
And in process of raising 2 young kids.
Yeah, that was.
So we're not talking you as a youngster here now, but
okay.
How's being Mr. Dad? How's that working?
We're fantastic. We've been married, my second wife, for 15 years, and we decided then we would have one child, sort of, as a bond, and it just didn't happen right away. It took a long, long time, 7, 8 years before it finally happened.
Right.
And so a little long in the tooth, but anyway, it happened, and then we thought we were through. We had our one child, and lo and behold, 20 months later, here comes a second one, and so I got a little boy and a little girl. And I am just tickled out. They are my life, I'll tell you. I couldn't be happier with those.
When I hear you talking about it, I can hear it in. Well, we're going to wrap this thing up. Just your thoughts on how you saw, because you went there when Bill D went there, how you saw the change in the attitude of not only of the students but the teachers and everything. How did you see that coming about?
Well, I didn't know Bill at all when he came, or when we both got there together, and I was coaching basketball, and Bill, then I got the head basketball job, so he was the head football and I was head basketball, so we kind of communicated a lot, right. Just joked back and forth, and had a pretty good relationship established with Bill. And then started working with him out on the field, helping the kids and what have you, and I just really got taken with his work ethic. Bill is a tremendous work ethic and a tremendous organizer, and it just, people ask me that same question. I've been asked that question many times when I was AD, how come Phoebus is so good? And I say it's, in 2 simple words, hard work. That's all it was, hard work. Those, he put together a tremendous coaching staff. They stayed together for a long, long time, and they all were on the same page, and just hard work, nothing else. And it was a pleasure to be associated with it. I loved it, and miss it. Now that I'm retired, I jokingly say the first year I was retired, it was quite an adjustment, and I jokingly say, as first time since I was 14 years old, I was unemployed. But it took me about a year to get past that. And then these past 2 years, I think I've pretty well got the hang of doing nothing now. I've got it down cold. But I do miss the camaraderie and the association I had with the football team.
Well, thanks for coming in. I appreciate
Bobby, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
I want to thank you for tuning in to LSC and Sportstime. I want to thank my special guest, Gerry Gentry. I'm your host, Bob Hintz. Until next time.